we're back with our second to last episode of Nothing's Ever Easy. So we have this episode, the penultimate episode. We'll have next episode, which will be the last 2 chapters. And then there'll be one episode after the week after that, a short one, just kind of explaining what the future of the podcast is, what the schedule looks like. And then there'll be a break. But that last episode will explain all of that. So we're gonna dive right in with chapter 39. Despite having fought to go with Colin and Sorin, I didn't fight to be in the first group sent from Cavern Hall to Oakbridge. I was enjoying the relative downtime after the turbulent months in Greensward, and from Colin's messages, I didn't have to fear for his safety. Bo ended up sending Kira and Bry with the first group, and from all accounts, the infiltration went off without a hitch. Colin had set Sorin up with an Oakbridge friend of his, the aforementioned Russell Darcy. Russ now had an official job at the castle infirmary, where it would not seem at all strange for him to talk to Sorin. During the rest of March and early April, Bo shifted 2 more small groups into Oakbridge, messages flying between us and the capital daily. Russell, Colin, and Sorin had almost worked out a fairly foolproof way to get the freedom fighters inside the castle. Once that was set, I volunteered for the last group. As soon as I had, Jay did too, citing the fact he was my very trusty bodyguard and would not bear to be separated from me. Stella rolled her eyes but looked a little regretful as she said she had to stay with Dave. Ryan and Jesse also chose to stay behind, this time because they would be in charge of one of the groups that came from Cavern Hall on the day of the attack. The 10 of us going in were given our various cover stories and ready set off the following morning. With a word to Mick, I stole Bo for the late afternoon while we still had a bit of daylight. We made our way outside, despite the lingering winter chill, because it was the only place we could really find privacy. It took a little searching to find a rock that wasn't damp from the spring rains, and then we sat side by side, leaning into each other. "Won't be long this time," Bo said after a few minutes. His breath felt warm on my hair. "I know, and then it'll be all over." That assumed that we won, and in winning, neither of us died. Despite the extra help that having Sorin on our side gave us, it was by no means a guarantee that any of us would make it through this alive. "And everything will change," he murmured. I sat back a little to look him in the eye. "But hey, you won't have to be king since your brother's still alive." "Yes, thank the gods for small favors," Bo said with a crooked smile. "I sincerely doubt I'm cut out for kingship. I think I'm probably barely cut out to be a prince." I patted his cheek lightly. "Bo, honey, you are one of the best princes this country has ever seen. Look at everything you've done for Tira. Your determination is why we're this close to taking Kira back. Without you, the freedom fighters would not exist." "Someone else could have and would have done it," he said, almost dismissively. I raised my eyebrows at him. "Bo Highcastle, don't you ever dare sell yourself short to me. Eventually, perhaps the ragtags would have condensed into something that would have passed as a rebellion, but without your leadership, skills, and background, it would not have happened for a lot longer, and I, for one, would be dead in a ravine between Elworth and Lockholm." "So, shut up," he said dryly. I grinned. "I do think this means you owe me a kiss," I agreed, and laughed as he pulled me forward and our lips met. "Apology accepted," I told him breathlessly, minutes later. "I solemnly swear I will not say such things again." "Even better. Now, I don't want any more serious conversation tonight. There'll be plenty of that as we start putting Tira back together once it's ours again." "I don't like that we won't be all together for the battle." "All the battle," he said. "Aw, I can take care of myself, good sir." He tickled me in the side, smirking as I squirmed and swatted his hand away. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." "You only meant it that way a little bit," I said, holding up my fingers about an inch apart. "Well, I'd feel better if I was the one watching your back, that's all. And if you were the one watching mine," he said honestly. "There's no one I trust more in the world." I knew he trusted Mick equally. The two were bonded and had been since Bo was a tiny child. But Mick wouldn't be with him either, which made me nervous because it meant Bo's back might actually not be adequately watched. I would have to speak to Duncan before I left. Mick was leading the third attack party. "You're going to make me blush." "Is that possible? Bry and Jay have both managed it." He waved his hand. "Bry and Jay have special magical powers that way. It transcends normal people. They don't count." I chuckled. Probably true. They do know how to push. "And we love them for it," he intoned dryly. "Sometimes. I'll be fine anyway, Bo. I'll have Jay, Bry, Kira, and Colin to watch my back. I'm far more concerned about yours. I'll make sure it's covered. Take Duncan and his buddies in your group." "If you insist, honey." I grinned. "I do, sweetie." I then leaned into his steady chest and took a deep breath. "I love you, Bo. I love you too. Although I'd understand if you ran for it once we're in Oakbridge." I immediately sat back up, feeling more than a little offended. "What?" "Well, I'm going to be an official prince once we're there. There's a lot of work and responsibility that comes with that." Are you saying I can't handle work and responsibility? I asked dangerously. You'll be a princess, he countered. That did actually stop me. Oh, well, shit. He clearly couldn't help himself and burst out laughing. Yes, shit. That's crap. Why did I fall in love with you again? I'm offering it out, he said a little tentatively. Oh, don't be a moron, I told him. You didn't know I was a prince when this started. I'm not a moron either, I told him. I don't like you because you're a prince, obviously, and I'm not going to run away because you are one. You're far too important to me for that. He visibly relaxed. Idiot. Okay, I wanted to make sure you knew what you were getting into. Do you know what you're getting into? It's not like you've been an official everyone knows me prince before. He paused. Good point. I guess we'll figure it out together. That's the best kind of figuring it out. He smiled. Yeah, I think I like that. I'll miss you in the meantime, I said honestly. I'll always miss you, but I feel a little more confident this time that you will not get yourself caught. Cross my heart, hope to die, I said. Colin will keep me safe. And if the gods forbid something did happen, I could only hope that somehow Sorin could help me. And you'll have Ben, Jesse, and Rye here with you. And our friend Jackson. What are you going to do with him when the battle happens? I'm not sure yet. I suppose that will rely heavily on him, Bo said. I will probably leave him here with Iris and those who can't fight. I trust him enough now that I don't think he'd come after them, and there'd be enough guards that he wouldn't stand a chance if he tried it. No, I trust him not to do something like that, too. He seems like a nice guy whose loyalties just fell on the other side. As if he would have been loyal to you or Rainier if things had played out a little differently. Bo nodded. That seems so. He also has a very definite soft spot for our friend Rye. I smirked. I'm glad I'm not the only one who has noticed. I'm also glad that neither doll has, or if they have, their respective girlfriends are keeping them quiet. I could actually see them working if they both decided to try. He pressed his lips together thoughtfully. What do you think I should do about Sorin? Hearing the man's names on Bo's lips made me fully realize that he'd gone from being Dakamar to Sorin to all of us, thanks mostly to Jackson's influence, but also Colin's reports. I don't know. Maybe we let the chips fall as they may, and if he's still alive after the battle, then we decide. See what Rainier says. I think Colin has plans. He'd written me a couple letters separate from the reports, and he was downright gleeful about something he was plotting, even if he was being evasive on the details. I hoped I could pin him down once I got to Oakbridge myself. He nodded. I think that's the best decision. Maybe if he survives the battle, he deserves to live. Stranger things, I agreed, and then shivered. Come on, as much as I hate it, the sun's going down, and we're going to lose our warmth. He stood and offered his hand, pulling me to my feet. I never lose my warmth, he said solemnly, eyes twinkling. I laughed. The road to Oakbridge was uneventful. For most of the trip, the 10 of us rode together, but once we got to the edges of the more frequent buildings and inns that marked the final approach into the capital, we split, heading in small groups for the 3 main gates of the city. Jay and I decided we wouldn't go to the same gate. I had put my hair under my hat and would be passing for a young man, but we still thought the pair of us ran the risk of being identified together. I did miss my partner in crime as myself and one other freedom fighter approached the gate. Our papers were scrutinized quite a bit, but Colin's information did not let us down, and the guards finally waved us through. Trying not to look as relieved as I felt, I steered my horse down the side streets to the safe house where half of us, Jay included, would gather for further instructions. We left our horses at an inn with a stable down the street and made our way the rest of the way on foot. I knocked the right rhythm, the door swung open, and I was pulled into a tight hug. You being alive has not gotten old yet, my brother said cheerfully. I returned it, glad to see him. I like to hope that me being alive will never get old, I told him, as dry as he was cheerful. Maybe not, but you'll get old. You'll get old sooner, I told him, and pushed him back so we could get in the door and shut it behind us. In case you two didn't meet when Colin was at Cavern Hall, Colin, this is Matthew. Matthew, my brother Colin. I'd gathered that, Matthew said, and shook Colin's hand. You're the first. Russ is in the kitchen if you want to go in and say hi, my brother said. I bet he'll be less rude to me, I said with a smirk, and trotted off in that direction before my brother could come up with a suitable retort. Matthew stayed behind to wait with Colin for the others. It took a minute to find the kitchen, and I poked my head in. A man about my age with dark shaggy hair was puttering around, putting together a pile of snacks which my stomach appreciated. We hadn't eaten since breakfast, and it was now a little after lunch. Can I help you with anything? He looked up and smiled. Hi, you must be Jez. I entered and offered my hand. Nice to meet you. Colin's spoken highly of you in his letters. He'd better, Russell said mildly. There are plates in that cupboard, if you'd get them down. I moved to do as ordered. Colin said you're working up at the castle now. Yes, Sorin arranged for me to bypass most of the hiring process quietly. I have a split shift today. Worked early this morning and need to be back a little before dinner until fairly late. I should see him after dinner. And he's been fine. He's been a fountain of information. Anything we want, he's happy to provide and then some, he said. He's clearly decided if he's going to go against his brother, he's not going to hold anything back. That corresponded with Colin's messages and somehow didn't surprise me. We'd all come to the realization that if he hadn't been serious about this, he never would have gone to Lockholm in the first place. Glad to hear it. I think we're all ready for this to be over. Russell smiled a little. It won't really be over once we displace them. You realize that, right? I set the plates down. Well, no, of course not, but this part will be over. I heard a knock echo down the hall. You've spent some time with Sorin now. What do you think about his future? He grinned. Ask your brother that question. Far be it for me to intervene in Colin's plots. So my theory was right. If your theory involves Colin most likely recruiting Sorin when this is over, then yes, definitely. I shook my head. At least Colin's staying busy. Russell blinked and then burst out laughing. Is that what your family calls this? I had to grin too. And my friends, it's a way of life. He shook his head, clearly. We were then interrupted by Colin, Jay, Matthew, and our 2 remaining freedom fighters as they entered the kitchen. Jezzy! Jay cried, like he hadn't just seen me a couple hours before. Thankfully, he didn't fully throw himself on me like he had a habit of doing. I gave him a tight squeeze, just to show I was happy he'd made it through the guards safely before patting him on the head. Down, Jamesy. He stepped back, grinning. I saw his intention a second before he acted on it and groaned as he threw himself on Russell in much the same manner. Russell! Hi! Nice to meet you! I knew I shouldn't laugh, and yet. Poor Russell was clearly taken aback as he patted Jay awkwardly on the back. Hello? Russ, you've met Jez, and this is Jay. Colin did the rest of the introductions. And everyone, this is Russell Darcy, but he goes by Russ. He's our secret weapon at the castle. Were you ever at Cavern Hall? Jay asked, having politely detached himself from Russ. You don't seem familiar. No, I've been in Oakbridge since before the death of the king, Russ said. Russ was an accidental recruit, Colin said, and grinned at him. He's worked at one of the local infirmaries for a while, and we met there. I got the vibe he might be receptive, so we planned to chat, and I dragged him in. Why do I have a feeling you have a lot of allies in infirmaries? I asked dryly. Your skepticism hurts me deeply, Jez. But it's probably not unfounded, Russ said, just as dryly as me. Jay held up his hand for a high five, and Russ returned it after only a moment's pause. Colin sighed loudly. Would you all like something to eat? Adopting Bo's habit of talking over us to change the topic is not going to work any better for you, I said, but began handing out plates as Russ set the large tray on the table within our reach. My brother stuck his tongue out at me. Despite both of us, talk did move to business as we made short work of the fair. Colin gave our 3 companions their assignments and said he and Russ would give us all a quick, essential tour of Oakbridge before seeing them off. Jay and I would be staying with Colin, Bri, and Kira, even if we'd have to be careful about going in and out. Colin said the building had multiple entrances and multiple apartments, so he wasn't too worried about surveillance. At this point, I was willing to take Colin's word on anything covert. After our tour, Russ had to return to his apartment and then head back to work, so we went to see Bri and Kira. Bri's greeting was even more effusive than Jay's, but at least he had reason. We hadn't seen him in over a month. I might have held on an extra minute, just glad to feel his solid form and reassure myself, again, that he wasn't dead. I haven't been dead all month, promise, he said cheerfully, ruffling my hair. I punched him in the arm. How's Oakbridge been treating you two? I asked as I turned to hug Kira. Great, actually, and Colin's made a decent roommate. I can see why my brother was able to handle him. She grinned past me to Colin as Jay threw himself into Bri's arms. Not surprisingly, Bri caught him with ease. Did you know that Colin and I initially did not get along at all? That actually surprised me. Neither had mentioned that previously, and they'd seemed to have a good relationship the little bit of time I'd spent with both of them. Really? Oh yeah, she hated me, Colin said, but never for letting her parents down, which always confused the crap out of me. Kira smiled slightly. Colin, she started. He held up his hands. I know. It wasn't my responsibility, and I did the best I could. I know. Still wish I could have saved them, too. That's all. So, why didn't you like him? Kira actually reddened. To be honest, I wasn't used to not being my brother's best friend. I mean, he was also really cocky and annoying at first, but mostly the first part. She was jealous, Jay said in a stage whisper, slinging an arm around my shoulders. Thank you, James, Kira said dryly. It made me smile. She was certainly Bri's match, and that translated, obviously, to Jay as well. Jay grinned widely at her. You're welcome! Let's fill you both in on your jobs while we're here, and then we can go grab some drinks and dinner, Kira suggested. Good idea, Colin said, and led us into a dining room, which was clearly not used for eating, as the table was covered in papers and maps of both Tira and the city of Oakbridge specifically. We spent the next hour or two going over our jobs, and then went to a nearby inn called the Caroling Sun, and had drinks and a very delicious dinner. The barkeep clearly knew all three of them and kept up a cheerful banter when she delivered our drinks and food. Colin didn't introduce us, and when I asked later, he explained that she knew full well who they were, but in a public setting he didn't want to say things where prying eyes might hear. The next 2 weeks passed in a flash. We scouted various venues, met with locals, watched soldiers' movements, and a variety of smaller jobs, like moving weapons to certain safe houses, and the like. We saw Russ at least once a day when he stopped by to report on movement in the castle and whatever Sorin said. None of the rest of us saw Sorin ourselves, but Colin did tell us that he left the castle rarely, so it was actually safer if he didn't start making frequent trips out for a reason no one knew. I saw the logic, but found myself staring up at the castle thoughtfully whenever we were in sight of it. Not only was it my future home, which was strange enough, but there was so much going on in there at any given moment, and so much of it was the same activities that would continue after we took it back. After all, a lot of the minutiae of running a country would not change. After the first week, word came to us from Sorin that he and Rainier, Russ told us that Sorin called him Ren, had decided that Anika was safest not at the castle when everything went crazy, just in case a freedom fighter not in the know accidentally killed her. They arranged for Colin to meet her and get her settled somewhere safe. So, my brother disappeared for the better part of the second week. We all knew our jobs, though, and collected reports as needed. A couple days after Colin's return to Oakbridge, the 6 of us, including Russ, gathered in the dining room around the maps and paperwork. Colin had been changing the subject any time any one of us asked about Anika, but he constantly looked terribly proud of himself, so I figured he'd done a good enough job of hiding her. He looked down at all the papers and then up at us and grinned. "Anyone else notice something?" "You've called a meeting like you're actually important?" Jay asked mildly. "Ha ha," Colin said, and then pointed at a large chart on the wall. Most of the items there were crossed out. "We're done. Or done with everything that needs any sort of time. The non-last-minute things." I had noticed, but assumed it was not the complete list. It dawned on me abruptly. "Are you saying that we're done?" "Now, Jez, my darling sister, that is, shut up, you know what I mean." He grinned. "It's time to send our illustrious leader a message telling him it's go time." Kira whistled quietly. "Go time," Bri repeated softly. "What do you need us to do for the last couple days?" Russ asked. "That is why I made a new list," Colin said cheerfully, and held up a much smaller and shorter one. He then went over it, assigning each of us tasks. Russ's list was the longest, but at the same time, none were particularly hard given his work environment. Somehow, the next couple days went by in even more of a blur than the previous 2 weeks. And then there was Stella, walking into the caroling sun to meet us. All of us acted nonchalant, despite Jay's obvious desire to do anything but. She settled at her table and grinned, although there was a tension in her expression. "They're ready. Tomorrow morning, at the dawn watch change." Jay took her hand and squeezed it. Colin grinned. "Perfect. Russ?" "I'm ready. I told you that yesterday. I'll head up there tonight and get a message to our friend." "The rest of you?" "Ready," Ree reported, and my stomach fluttered. The time that followed his visit to Lockholm might well have qualified as the strangest in Sorin's life, and that was saying something. He worried constantly about Dean and his mother-in-law's failing health, along with his inability to do anything about it. He worried about Ani as usual, and the fact she was caught in the middle of this entire mess, and that would not change, even with Beau Highcastle's promise. He worried about Vladimir and the long-ago events that had driven him to the point he was at now, and whether he, Sorin, was doing the right thing and turning against him. But he stuck to his promise. Vladimir, in his better days, certainly would have agreed that Annie's safety was paramount to either of theirs. It had always been their rule growing up. 2 days after arriving home, with Vladimir safely off on another wild goose chase, the humor of the freedom fighters coming to him when Vladimir was trying so hard to find them was not lost on Sorin. He quietly slipped out of the castle and down to the caroling sun to meet with Colin and his anonymous friend. Neither were there when he arrived, but that didn't surprise him. Colin would be making damn sure Sorin didn't bring any surprises with him. He waited almost 10 minutes before Colin slipped out of a side alley, accompanied by a man a little younger, with very dark wavy hair and a pair of solemn eyes that had clearly seen more than they liked to admit. Sorin knew the look well and wondered if Colin could see it, if that was why Colin had picked this young man. Colin stepped forward, offering his hand with a smile. "Sorin." "Colin," he replied. "Sorin, this is Russell Darcy. Russ, Sorin Dacamar." Russell's expression was wary, but not closed. "Mr. Dacamar, Mr. Darcy." "Russ has been working at one of the Oakbridge infirmaries for a couple of years now," Colin said. "I was hoping we might be able to get him a job in the castle, to make correspondence easy." Sorin sized him up freshly, and then shot a series of detailed questions about various injuries and illnesses at him. After an initial look of surprise, Russ responded quickly and accurately, only getting one wrong, and, in all fairness, it was a pretty obscure illness. "And you don't mind starting pretty low?" Russ smiled slightly. "I'm not in it for the job. Medical work was never my end goal." "Working for Colin was." No, and I'm still not sure it is long-term, but I believe in what they're fighting for. A step behind him, Colin nodded solemnly. Clearly, he wasn't going to let Russ leave easily. Then we're in agreement, Sorin said. Can you come up to the castle tomorrow? I'll let the guards know to let you in, and we'll introduce you to everyone. You clearly have learned a thing or two while working in the city, so no one will question your ability to do the job. I think it'll be a nice fit, and I'm down there fairly often anyway. You clearly have knowledge on the topic as well. The initial learning was of necessity, but I find myself fascinated with the entire concept. To be honest, it might have been my end goal had things gone differently. What time tomorrow? I'm an early riser, so you choose a time. 9? I'll meet you at the infirmary at 9, he agreed. Awesome, Colin said, beaming. The next day, Russ pretty much got the job of his own accord. If the head doctor thought it was weird that Sorin was backing a young person from the city as a potential infirmary worker, he said nothing of it to Sorin, or, more importantly, to Vladimir. Russ fit quietly into the infirmary's flow and did a good job. The head doctor had nothing but praise for him after the first couple days and appreciated the extra set of hands. Sorin stopped by daily, and no one seemed to notice that he talked to Russ for longer or more quietly than he spoke to the rest of the staff. Every time, Russ had new questions about things Colin wanted to know, and Sorin answered them to the best of his ability, working on finding the answer the next day if he didn't know it immediately. Sorin had to be losing his touch, because it took almost 2 weeks to realize that some of Russ's questions came from general curiosity and not Colin's need to know. When it hit him, they were in the middle of a conversation and he stopped dead, staring at Russ. Colin doesn't need to know that. Russ smiled and shrugged. Maybe I'm just interested at this point. In me? That really shouldn't surprise you, he said. But Sorin found that it did. He didn't consider himself particularly interesting and never had. He shrugged. Oh, come on, Russ said, sounding amused. I'm really not that interesting, despite how everything has played out. Okay, then just flat out mysterious. That I'll accept, he said with a small smile. What has Colin told you? He did ask me to pass you a message today, which I don't think is good news. Sorin was instantly on alert. What is it? He said to tell you she doesn't have very long, but he's got things taken care of, and we'll talk to you about it when you've got a chance. He closed his eyes. Colin would make sure that Dean was okay, and that was important. Although, in a way, he'd miss Anna and already missed Cedric. His in-laws had been good people who had not deserved him as a son-in-law. Him or his family. At least Dean was safe from all that. Thank you, Russ. I'm going to assume that means something to you? Yes. Tell Colin thanks, and I owe him one. Of course. No problem, Russ said. Need any other messages passed? Not yet. I want to talk to Annie first. Sure. I'll see you tomorrow, Russ said with a smile. Something about the way he said it struck Sorin, and he realized that the wariness that Russ had regarded with him at first had not just faded, but completely disappeared. In fact, the smile seemed genuine, like he wanted to see him tomorrow. All right, tomorrow, Sorin said, not sure what to make of this weird new feeling of someone other than Annie being happy to see him, and a member of the Freedom Fighters, no less. Trying not to dwell on it, he nodded sternly and quickly left. He tried to ignore it from then on out, but it was hard. Russ didn't just ask questions, but also created conversation that had nothing to do with the troubles at hand. But Sorin didn't feel like they were prying questions. The latter were about Ren and Annie, and Sorin was happy to not talk about himself. He also found that he sometimes instinctively asked questions of Russ, but the other man dodged anything about his past with a mastery Sorin almost envied. Then, Russ told him that Anna had died and that Dean was somewhere safe. Not so obviously as that. Colin was certainly keeping his secret, but in a way that Sorin knew what he meant. So he finally screwed up his courage and went to find his sister. Not surprisingly, she was with Ren in their room. As he knocked and let them know it was him, he briefly debated trying to draw her elsewhere. But Ren knew about Diana, and Sorin had checked the peepholes to make sure no one was spying on them, so he felt relatively safe talking about it. Still, he opened the door and poked his head in. Hey, you two, want to go for a walk? He asked them both. Always, Ren said, hopping up and offering his hand to Annie, who took it, and they joined Sorin outside the room. He led them down to a fairly large balcony, where it would be easy to tell if they had any listeners, and went right to the edge. The pair joined him. What is it, Sorin? Annie asked softly once they were there. He smiled slightly. How much have you told Ren about the time I wasn't with you and Vladimir? She told me you were married, that your wife died of an incurable disease, and that you came back to them after and were a different person, Ren said. She didn't tell you about my son. Your son? No, he said, drawing out the last word. We found out Diana was sick shortly after Dean was born. He just turned 6 last week. Since shortly after Diana died, he's been living with my in-laws, Diana's parents. Except I recently found out that first Cedric and now Anna have died. Annie gasped quietly. Where's Dean now? I don't know. What I haven't told you yet is... He'd been putting off this entire conversation, still not sure how much to tell them, but with Dean's future at stake and with a small plan forming in his mind, he had to tell them. My trip to Lockholm. He quickly filled them in on how things had gone, and meeting Ren's brother and his contact with Colin now. Colin knows that the man is a genius. He followed the trail and eventually discovered Dean's existence. He has safely hidden Dean where no one will know who he is, and he's safe, but I can't let it go at that. Ren held up his hands. Wait, slow down. That is a lot of information to throw at us all at once. You've met my brother? Sorin made himself take a deep breath. It was a lot of information, and he had to let them absorb it enough that neither of them would make any mistakes with it. Yes, I met Beau. He has a lot of high castle in him. There was certainly no mistaking him for anything but your relation. I've also met the two youngest Lockholms, and Colin has proven reliable and helpful. There's also a man, Russ, working in our infirmary, who's a spy for the freedom fighters, and he got his jobs thanks to me suggesting him. I've met him, Annie said with some surprise. He seemed really nice. He is very nice. I speak to him at some point every day to answer questions and pass along information to the freedom fighters. Well, shit, Ren said, dragging a hand through his hair in some strange combination of agitation and being impressed by the entire thing. How did Colin find Dean? Annie asked, patting Ren soothingly on the arm. She didn't seem the slightest bit surprised, and Sorin hated, for a short moment, how well she knew him. At the same time, though, he was reassured that he was doing the right thing. He explained it again in more detail, then continued. I made a deal with Beau that Ren gets to decide your fate, Annie, and while I trust my brother-in-law will make the only logical decision, Ren looked downright offended, obviously, I think it would be better if you weren't here when the fighting happens, Sorin finished smoothly, raising an eyebrow at Ren. Don't insult my honor, Ren said, almost sulkily. Annie kissed him on the cheek. Down, Muffin, she said amused, before turning back to Sorin. I take it you want me to go to Dean. Yes, please. Through Russ, we can get you to Colin, and he can get you to Dean. I'm sure Colin has him safe, but he's already been without family long enough, Ren asked quietly. Sorin pressed his lips together and nodded. Even if Dean didn't exist, I'd still agree with Sorin, Ren told Annie, squeezing her waist. I'd rather have you far from the fighting. Although I trust you can take care of yourself, I don't trust some freedom fighter to make the distinction between you and someone they should fight. And if I can't be there to protect you, it would just be until the tide has changed for good. They might not want me back after that. I don't care. I will, Ren said firmly, cupping her cheek and turning her to face him. Once the fighting is over, I will make sure you come home. Here, with me, where you belong. She smiled, brushing his hair from his forehead. I know you will, Rennie. Sorin smiled too to cover the sudden ache in his chest. Most of the time, he didn't let himself miss Diana, but other times, it wasn't something he could avoid. How soon should I go? She asked Sorin. As soon as I can get everything arranged with Colin and we can make it look natural. We'll say you're sending you out on another secret mission. That's how they coded her last ill-fated attempt to join the freedom fighters. All right, I'll start packing, she said and sighed, leaning against Ren. He squeezed her shoulder. Thanks, Annie. You're keeping me safe and yet thanking me? You know why. Her smile softened. I'll tell him all about you. You should, but then Sorin will be able to too, Ren said. I think there are better than even odds I won't make it, Sorin said, keeping his voice light, so let's consider this a just-in-case. Ren let out a low whistle. Someone's been working on you. That's the most positive I've ever heard you. The freedom fighters seem to be rubbing off on him, Annie agreed solemnly. He rolled his eyes. Yes, you two are very cute. Of course we are, she chirped. He tried to smother his smile with mixed results. As soon as I've gotten things sorted with Colin, I'll let you know the timing, he said, and then looked at Ren. It had occurred to him that he might be able to get the prince out as well, and he suspected the same had potentially occurred to Ren, too. I'm staying, he said simply. This is my castle, and I will not abandon it at any time. I was hoping you'd say that, he said, and inclined his head. Your Majesty. Sorin waited to talk to Vladimir until after Annie had left, which took about 3 days to arrange and execute. He wanted her safely out of Vladimir's clutches in case their brother got wise to anything, not that he expected him to. He knocked on Vladimir's partially open door. Vlad? His brother looked up. Sorin, he said, with a clipped edge to the word. What do you want? Do I have to want anything? Vladimir's eyes narrowed. Clearly that had been the wrong thing to say. It would seem not. You appear to be very willing to ignore me when you decree something. It took Sorin a second. Annie. Vlad had gone back to his paperwork with a fake focus. Do you have a problem with her being out of the castle? She's not safe out there. She's safer there than she is here. Out there, she can be anyone. And if some freedom fighter recognizes her? That's when Colin truly proves his worth, Sorin thought. If we lose, she will have a much greater chance of survival away from Oakbridge. We won't lose. And even if we did, what's left for her then? Presumably we'd both be dead. Jackson too. That's her entire family. Except Ren, Sorin said, before he could really think better of it. Vladimir shot right to his feet, clearly furious. The prince, he bit out, is not Anika's family. You counted Jackson, and legally he's far less family than Ren now that he's an adult. Despite the fact he kept his words even and calm, deeply ingrained instinct screamed at him to run now. If his brother could have struck him dead with looks alone, Sorin would have been flat on the floor. How dare you, Vladimir hissed. You have no one else who would dare, so that leaves me, Sorin said flatly, clenching his fists at his sides. Vlad, I didn't come here to fight. And yet you started one, Vladimir snapped. That wasn't fair at all. He just stated the truth to Vladimir's delusions. Vladimir had always been the one who wanted Ren and Ani married. Sorin had not agreed until it had become clear to him that Ren at least liked Ani, even if he hadn't predicted what the relationship would truly become. But these things were convenient to forget clearly. I just wanted to see how you're doing. It's been days since I last saw you. Mostly because Vladimir was rarely in Oakbridge. I'm fine, he minced out, still gripping his desk with white fingers. Good, I'm glad, Sorin said openly, even if he didn't believe it. Do you need me to do anything? Or are you going to be around a while? I heard that you ordered the garrison that's been going with you to stand down. They'll come to us, Vladimir said, gaze not focused on anything in the room. They'll come to us, and we'll crush them like the insignificant pests they are. Once, Sorin would have argued that he needed to pay attention to the freedom fighters, that they were more of a danger than Vladimir let himself see, but that time was past. He had argued and lost, and soon it would be over. Vlad, he said quietly, seeing a fleeting wariness in his brother's face and hoping to use it as an opening. Get out, Vladimir growled. Sorin couldn't stop his instincts this time, taking a step back. The wariness was gone in a flash, replaced by an almost feral look. Sorin made a note to check Ren's guard roster and make sure he had put exactly the right people there to ensure the prince stayed safe. Vlad, get out, go do your job and let me do mine. He took a slow breath and released it. Very well, let me know if there's anything I can do for you, he said, then backed out of the room, not quite daring to take his eyes off his brother. Only once he pulled the door shut did he turn and hurry away. So be it. Chapter 40. We knew that the rest of the freedom fighters would come from 3 directions. The front gates, which always stood open during daylight hours, and the 2 smaller auxiliary gates, which weren't used as often, and generally kept closed unless there was a scheduled arrival. Individuals can get in and out via the gatehouse and a small single door there. We would need it open by the time our forces arrived. Colin had put himself in charge of assisting at the front gates, and had taken Stella among others for assistance. Jay and I were given the north gate, which was where Bo would be attacking. Bri and Kira, God's help us, were in charge of the southern gate. Despite warnings we wanted the gate intact, I had a feeling that might not be possible with Bri. Jay and I had spent 2 days scouting our gate every free moment we had. Its usual complement was 8 soldiers, with 2 of those in the guardhouse and 2 further outside of the walls. 2 more watched the city from the ground, flanking the gate, and the final 2 stood on the wall and watched the farmland that stretched away from Oakbridge. In the hour before dawn, the morning of the attack, we had taken our usual vantage point to wait. Just before we knew the dawn watch change would occur, we heard the distinct hooting of an owl from a little deeper inside the city. I looked at Jay and nodded. We slid down out of the abandoned building into the street, pressing close into the walls and keeping to the shadows as we crept closer, hands on our sword hilts. When the change came, there were only 6 guards, as had been previously organized. What's going on? One of the men from the guardhouse asked as he emerged. Higher-up said we've got other stuff to do today, so only a 6-man complement. The first man, a sergeant from his uniform, frowned at the lesser-ranked replacement. I'll have 2 of mine stay while I go investigate. I held my breath. 6 men, especially with a surprise attack, Jay and I could take. More than that, we'd need our backup, including our friendly owl, but the quicker we could do this and keep it quiet, the better. Still, it wouldn't be the end of the world if 2 more stayed, especially since those 2 would be half asleep. Jay shifted and pointed. While I'd been pondering, the sergeant had gestured for 2 of his men to stay, neither looking the least bit happy, and marched off with 5 other relieved men. The replacement rolled his eyes. "Go take a load off in the guardhouse until Sergeant Wilkes is content with the orders. We've got the 6 other posts," he said. "You'd think with our bosses he wouldn't be a bother questioning this stuff anymore." If only he knew. "Thank you, sir," the 2 men who'd been watching on all night said, and disappeared into the guardhouse in double time. 2 more, who would be posted outside, followed. That was our signal. Now, before this Wilkes could throw a kink in the plans. I nudged Jay with my elbow, and he cupped his hands around his mouth and let out 2 long hoots. I began counting to 20. That would give our backup enough time to receive the message and be ready. While I counted, Jay unslung his bow from his shoulder and fit an arrow to it, holding it ready by his side, watching me. Across the main road, somewhere out of sight but parallel to us, our support was doing the same. I palmed a small throwing knife. While my bow skills were still good, I was also better than Jay at knife throwing, so I had chosen to take one of the guards standing on the ground facing the city, leaving the man on the wall as the target of the others. As I reached 5, Jay slid next to me. If the men looked right, they'd be able to see him. A slow bit of movement in my peripheral vision told me his mirror was doing the same. I reached 0. Jay drew back his string, sighting more accurately to the wall on the wall guard closest to us, and let fly. At the same time, I raised my arm and threw. Then I raced forward. Depending on how accurate our various shots had been would determine how quickly we needed to get to those in the guardhouse. I saw almost immediately that my throw had been off. It hit the man, but on the wrong side of his chest. He reeled back, but didn't go down. Still, by the time his brain had processed not only the pain, but what had caused it, I'd reached him. I had another knife ready, and I drove it at him. He twisted, trying to avoid the blow as he fumbled to draw his sword. I almost felt sorry for him and his lack of smaller, more easily drawn weapons. This time, my knife hit the mark. His eyes went wide, and he gasped silently, looking surprised by the turn of events. Then, I pulled my knife out, stepping back, and his body sagged against the wall to crumple in a heap. Jay had reached me, bow slung over his shoulder and knife drawn. To my right, an Oakbridge freedom fighter, recruited by my brother, finished off the other guard inside. "Well, Wall?" I asked Jay. "Both dead," he reported as we turned to the guardhouse, whose door stood only about 2 yards away. Before we could reach it, though, one of the tired guards poked his head out. "What?" he began, before Jay pounced. This time, I really did feel sorry for the man. It was only his bad luck that he'd been chosen to stay behind and wasn't happily headed to bed back at the castle, where he might have only been taken captive and survived the upcoming, no current, battle for Oakbridge and all of Tira. Jay caught him in the gut and sort of bear-hugged him, pulling him from the open doorway. I darted around him, but paused before crossing into view of the remaining guard in the guardhouse. It was much darker in there than it was even in the early dawn light of the street. It turned out my hesitation worked in my favor, because the second man emerged a moment later. I thrust my knife into his gut and pulled, cutting him open. He dropped almost immediately, grasping at his stomach. "We planned, so this should be easy? Why do I still feel weird about it?" Jay asked, as we both paused for a second to catch our breath. We couldn't wait too long in case either Wilkes came back with possible reinforcements, it would depend on who we ran into first at the castle, or someone else spotted us and set up an alarm. To my surprise, it was Russ who answered. I hadn't even known that Russ was one of our assistants. My brother and I would have words next time I saw him. "Because it's rare plans go to form," he said dryly. "Come on, we still have 2 outside who might notice their buddies from above are no longer there. And for all we know, they have another way of sending up an alarm." "Thanks for that positive thought," Jay muttered, but led the way into the guardhouse. Russ and I followed. The 4th freedom fighter, when I glanced at her, just said, "Isabel." I nodded acknowledgement. At the far end of the small guardhouse, which was barely longer than the thick defensive wall itself, Jay placed his hand on the doorknob and opened it at an entirely normal pace, stepping outside as he did, drawn knife in his other hand. Only then did I realize he'd stolen one of the helmets from the soldiers we'd already killed. I could follow his reasoning. In the early morning air, he might gain crucial seconds before the 2 soldiers outside realized he was not otherwise dressed in the livery that had apparently been designed by Vladimir's father a long time ago, according to Sorin. I made a vague note to ask him about the symbolism on the uniforms if we got the chance. Jay moved swiftly out of view, presumably towards the nearest guard, and I realized that the last one would have time to prepare, so I burst out after him, bolting towards that last guard in an attempt to get to him before he was fully alert to the threat bearing down on him. Russ was right behind me, but Isabel stayed in the guardhouse. As Jay engaged the startled guard, the gate started to rise with the rumble of chains and wood, and I realized why. The whole point of the plan was to get the gate open and hold it as our people reached it. The guard I was after, the last damn one, reacted in good time, sword already drawn by the time I reached him. I offered a quick slash at his arm before having to dart back to avoid the longer reach of the sword. The man hesitated, clearly debating his best move. Russ made the decision for him. "Jez, drop," he ordered crisply. I did not hesitate, dropping straight to the ground. As I caught my weight smoothly, I heard a grunt and glanced up to see an arrow protruding out of the man's chest. It was buried deep due to the proximity of the shot. I scrambled back to my feet. Good thinking. By then, Isabel had gotten the gate open to my waist, and Jay was already heading back in to help her. Thanks, he said, and then pointed out away from the castle. Looks like the troops are here. I looked up too. Relief spread through me. Thank the gods for that, I said, and raised my hand in a wave, even as I squinted to see if I could spot Bo. Sure enough, my heart lifted further as I recognized the figure who came sprinting towards us. A moment later, Bo's arms were around me, hugging me tightly. Hi, I managed, returning it fiercely, despite the bloody knife in my hand. You okay? I smiled and didn't bother to answer. He knew. Our hug did not last nearly as long as I would have preferred, but we both knew we didn't have the time. So we parted, Bo kissing me briefly on the cheek and smiling at Russ, which was my cue for introductions. I did so quickly and retreated to the guardhouse, and I did the same with Isabel. She nodded curtly as she and Jay focused on getting the gate fully up. As they did, two things happened. The rest of the group caught up, and distant bells started in the city. Someone, somewhere, had caught on to the invasion. Fine by me. We'd known from the beginning that the element of surprise would only last as long as it took to get everyone in, and had planned accordingly. Bo quickly detailed 4 others to stay with Isabel at the gates, leaving the local woman in charge. He then split the rest of us into smaller groups. Each would take one of the roads stretching away from the gate, making it quicker for us to sweep the city. Each group had enough for 2 rows of freedom fighters to completely block the road. It took us a bit to encounter any resistance. The soldiers were disorganized and came in such small batches that they were no match for us. With Vladimir presumably hiding in the castle, his men didn't put up a good defense. But I couldn't help feeling impressed at how Sorin had called his brother's reaction. It would also hopefully cause the castle to be an easier fight. The 3 soldiers only fought through the first few casualties before surrendering. As much as I hated having to waste our people to watch them, none of us were killers without reason, and it was strangely reassuring not to have to kill any more than absolutely necessary. We'd figure out what to do with the prisoners later. Before I knew it, we'd reached the main road. We looked towards the castle and could see the wall bristling with troops. Not yet, I told Bo. We'll clear the city first, he agreed. We all knew Sorin couldn't make his move too early. Oakbridge, as I discovered, was loosely grid-based, while the city walls formed approximately a circle. The castle sat on the eastern end of the city. The main street flowed straight from the castle's entry courtyard down to the gates from east to west. The road in from each of the side gates ran straight into the main street, but at 2 different points. The group with Brian and Jesse should come in on a street west of us. We'd come from the north. Beyond the basic cross that set up, there were smaller streets that ran both parallel and perpendicular to the main street, but many of the alleys and small roads were less than straight, and some of the oldest parts of the city were a complete warren of alleys and dead ends. In a way, clearing the city of opposition in a timely fashion was not something I was looking forward to. Russ and Jay joined us, Jay wiping his sword on his pants irreverently. What now? Our forces had spread out, but were coalescing again now that we were at the main street, so instead of answering directly, Bo raised his voice so everyone could hear him. Other than the continued ringing of a few bells and the fairly distant sounds of conflict, the city was quiet. No one was abroad on the streets, except the occasional darting form, but none came close to us. Bo glanced towards the fighting, but we all knew unless there was an emergency, we would stick to our jobs. All right, we're going to break back into smaller groups. We'll spread out from here on our side of the main street and clear out any opposition. Remember, civilians are off limits. Any damage that's done to any building should be kept to a minimum. These are our people, the same as any of you here, so act responsibly. The split happened seamlessly, and I realized Bo had prepared for this earlier to save time. And us? I asked him, indicating myself, Jay, and Russ. Bo offered a quick, crooked smile. I might have saved room on my team. Good for it? I'm just surprised you want me by your side at such a moment of triumph, Jay said with a loud and fake sniff. I am truly honored, although I'm also aware you consider me chopped liver and really just did this so you'd have an excuse to sit close to our lovely Jasmine. James, Bo and I growled, pretty much in concert. He grinned. Shall we? Bo sighed. Russ punched Jay in the shoulder, far more gently than I would have if I'd been close enough. You're learning too fast, Jay whined at him, even as Bo gestured to our group and headed back into the side streets. We encountered little resistance at first, just the occasional pocket of soldiers who didn't even seem to be aware we were there. But as we worked through the back streets towards the castle, they got smarter, or bolder. The 20 or so of us in Bo's group had just turned a corner when a yell stopped us. Ahead, a group of approximately the same number of the 3 soldiers stood by a house. One held a knife to a small girl's throat, while another stood by the door with a torch. All of these houses in the back roads were wooden and no doubt highly flammable. Come any closer and I'll kill the girl. Keep it up and we'll torch the house. It's got the rest of the family inside. 3 generations, the soldier called. We froze. Bo spread his hands slightly without really lowering his sword. You're losing, he said. There's no need for innocents to be hurt. Hurting innocents is exactly how we can start winning, the man retorted. Russ, Jay murmured behind me. His hand lightly touched my back, then trailed down to where one of my throwing knives rested on my hip. If we hit the one with the torch, he'll drop it, and we risk the family inside, Russ replied softly. He was further away from me. Then what do you want? Bo asked. I knew he could hear our compatriots, but acted like he hadn't heard anything. I did my best to split my focus without seeming that way. Hit the torch? Jay suggested. Stall them, Russ said. I have an idea. You'll know when to act. I felt a shift behind me, although Jay was still there, slowly pulling the knife from my belt. It was genius, actually, using me to block the soldier's view of him while he got a weapon he could use, since his bow was slung over his shoulder and any attempts to use it would be far too obvious. Russ? I asked without moving my lips. Gone, Jay said. I'd missed the soldier's response, but could see Bo's frustration at the standoff. I want you all to lay down your weapons and put your hands on your head, the man ordered. This won't stop us. We're all over the city now. The soldier's lips curled in a sneer. You think I don't know who you and your friend are? He asked. You're the other High Castle bastard, and she's Jasmine. You'll be all the leverage we need to stop your friends. Actually, I said cheerfully, by virtue of the fact he is a High Castle, he's not a bastard. But yes, I am Jasmine. The man scowled. Put down your weapons. The girl, maybe 8 years old, stood very still in his grasp, staring at us with wide, dried eyes. I shot her what I hoped was a reassuring smile. Now, he added, pressing the dagger closer to the girl's throat. Okay, Bo said. Jay had the knife free from my belt as Bo and I made a show of lowering our swords, very, very slowly, towards the ground. The soldier grinned in triumph, not seeming to even care that we were both being ridiculously slow, or that the others were being just as slow in drawing or lowering weapons. It really could have been more obvious that we were stalling, but he somehow, Gods be thanked, didn't see it. As it turned out, there was absolutely no doubt about when to act. A large cascade of water, at least a good-sized bucket full, tumbled down on the man holding the torch, soaking him and putting out the flame. By the time the water hit, I spun aside, still clutching my sword, and Jay let the knife fly. It caught the man in the throat, mere inches above the little girl's head. Somehow, the child had the presence of mind to shove his hand away before he could slit her throat in his slide to death. Then she scrambled towards us. I scooped her up and out of the way of our charging fighters, holding her close as she shook, wrapping her arms around my neck tightly. The two sides clashed, and only then did the child let out a tiny screech of terror. It's all right, I told her. It's all right now. We've got you. I backed further from the fray and bumped straight into the solid body near the mouth of the alley beside the threatened house. I jumped and spun, ready to somehow defend both of us, but Russ held up his hands. It's just me. Oh, thank the gods, I said. Wasn't sure how I was going to fight like this. He peered past me, sword drawn. Looks like our folks have it covered. I looked that way too and could tell the force of our attack had overwhelmed the soldiers and they were battling on their heels. That was genius, I told him. What made you think of it? He jerked a thumb over his shoulder. Saw the pump down there, and getting on the vast majority of roofs in Oakbridge is easy. Just glad I could do it in time. Us too. We couldn't have done it much longer. I'm sure you would have thought of something, he said. I nodded. Your family in that house? I asked the little girl, not sure I'd get a response. Yes, she whispered. Any of them hurt? My uncle tried to stop them. We'll get him taken care of. Bo was coming our way, bloody sword in his grip. He thanked Russ, shaking his hand with more energy than necessary. Russ winced a little, then turned to the girl and me. Let's get you back to your family, he told her gently. When we reached the house, Jay was already talking to an older gentleman in the doorway who was wringing my friend's hand with enthusiasm. A woman broke from them and raced over to take the girl from my arms. Thank you, she said tearfully. Our pleasure, I told her, even if it occurred to me that their family wouldn't have even been in trouble if it hadn't been for us. At least it had ended well. The older man had switched to shaking Bo's hand, and Russ smirked at Bo's slight wince. Anne's in there treating the uncle. She said it didn't look serious and will be good to go in a couple minutes, Jay told me as they peered at my side. Perfect. The little girl picked up her head from where it was buried in her mother's shirt. Thank you, she said shyly. You're welcome, I said. We weren't going to let him hurt you. You were incredibly brave. The soldiers are big bullies, she said with a little more confidence. They like it when you cry, so I told myself I couldn't. I smiled. After today, you won't have to worry about the soldiers anymore. Really? Yes, we're here to get rid of them. Then the rumors are true, her mother asked, eyes lighting. We're really going to have a High Castle back on the throne. My gaze darted to Bo. That's the plan. She beamed in pure relief. Oh, thank the gods. We'd hoped this day would come since they announced that Prince Rainier was still alive. Things have gotten so bad around here. It's all we can do to afford our house. We'll do our best to get things back to pre-3 as soon as possible. She smiled. Of course you will, dear, and we'll be patient. She freed a hand and offered it to me. We appreciate everything you folks have done for those of us who weren't in the position to do the same. It's our deepest pleasure, I told her sincerely. Her expression softened further. Oh, I don't doubt that, but I also know to be where you are means you've sacrificed a lot, and we won't forget that. My cheeks warmed. Thank you, I said quietly, just as I spotted Anne exit the house. She and Bo exchanged a few quick words, then Bo patted the old man's hand. Time to move out, he called. The 3 soldiers had fought to the last man, so our people had spread out to protect in case of follow-up attack from another group. We fully regrouped, and with waves and well wishes from our side and the extended family, we headed further down the streets. A little while later, as we headed back towards the main street to hopefully meet up with the rest of the freedom fighters, I fell in step with Bo. "Too few," I murmured. He nodded grimly. "I'm hoping everyone else saw more fighting, but more likely the castle will be a bloodbath." I did some quick math, taking the approximate number of soldiers we'd fought and tripling them before comparing the numbers to what Sorin said was stationed in Oakbridge. Well, the garrison for the city is on the south side of Maine. Vladimir shouldn't have had time to pull them back to the castle. As I said this, we reached the street, and instantly Nathaniel, Reardon's assistant, came rushing up. "Sir, we need help!" "The garrison?" Bo asked, giving me a look. "Don't shoot the messenger," I muttered. Nathaniel looked a little alarmed at that, not realizing I meant me, and hastened to explain. "Yes, sir, they're really dug in." "Lead the way, Nathaniel," Bo said, after stationing some of our troops to meet Colin and Mick. Nathaniel took off at a jog, leading us through a winding path. The garrison, as it turned out, sat close to the castle, so close soldiers on the wall could lay down covering fire. Our men were a block or two back, keeping them as pinned down as possible, but not actively engaging. I looked around for any of our group as Bo beelined after Nathaniel, heading for Reardon. Before I'd really even glanced about, I was hit with a hug that almost knocked me off my feet. "Where's Jay?" Bri demanded. "Right here," his brother said, hugging Kira. "Why are you bleeding?" "Not anymore, duh," Bri said, but pulled back to show off a large bandage peeking out from under his shirt along his shoulder. I was aiming for a matching facial scar, but the guy had poor aim. I slugged him in the other arm as hard as I could. "Not funny." He grinned, although it held a pain twinge much to my satisfaction. "You thought all my other dead jokes were funny." "When we were all potentially about to die," I protested. Point. "How do you stand him?" I asked Kira. She shrugged. "Honestly, I have no idea. Are you two okay?" "Just fine," she said, quickly filling her in. "You didn't get Jesse and Rye?" "No, Duncan and his crew. Jesse and Rye are apparently with Mick and your brother." That reminded me to speak to Bo about not following my advice and making sure someone was watching his back on the initial approach to the city. "Are you hurt?" I asked her. "No, but we've got a lot who are." "Reardon's flagging us," Jay said. As we reached them, Reardon spread his hands. "I don't know what to do. We can't get to them because of the archers." "We've got another hour until Sorin's move, and we need to be elsewhere then," Russ said. "Your archers can't get to them?" Bo asked, frowning. "We've gotten a couple, but not enough to make a difference." "Why not?" Jay asked. "The angles?" "Exactly. Between the fact we have to shoot up and the wind, it's been near impossible to land them right." Jay held up a hand, pointing, squinting along it as he measured distance in arcs. I mentally did the same. "Yeah, I see the problem. Well, we just need to get level with them." "Windows?" I asked, looking around, but none of the buildings close to the wall were more than a story or a story and a half tall. Roofs would not give nearly enough coverage for our people. Jay gave a knowing grin and shifted his finger. "The wall. It's not perfect because the protection on the inside is not as tall, but it's better than the rooftops." Bo glanced at Reardon, who shrugged. "It might just work. We've got the city walls cleared, and between the fortifications of the buildings, ours shouldn't be too exposed." "That still leaves the issue of a fortified and heavily defended garrison. Going in there will mean a lot of loss of life," Kira said, "even without the archers." "Fire arrows," Jay said promptly. "Boom," Bryce said approvingly and gave his brother a high five. "Smoke them out," Reardon said. "I like it." "Keep 2 archers back for fire arrows," Jay said. "I'll take the rest up to the wall. What's the nearest access?" "I'll show you," Bry told him. Reardon took the brothers to round up the archers while Russ went to help Anne with some of the injured. "How close can we get?" Bo asked Kira. "I'll show you." She led us halfway down the block until we just see the garrison and had clearly reached the end of our line. Any closer and you're in easy sight and range of the archers. Bo looked between us and the defended building, and a makeshift barricade surrounding much of it and the occasional head popping up to check on us. "Close enough," he said and raised his voice. "To those in the garrison, can you hear me?" There was a pause as a couple heads peeked out at us. "Yeah, we can. So what of it, traitor?" someone finally yelled back. "I'm Bo Highcastle, Prince of Tira," Bo called. "In the name of my brother, the rightful king, I'm giving you the opportunity to surrender peacefully before more lives are lost." A longer pause and more heads this time, all peering in our direction. Clearly, Sorin had not passed his suspicions onto the common soldier. The one with the little girl must have been a higher rank, or smarter, than I'd realized. "Bullshit!" the same voice called. "There's only one Highcastle left." "And that's their biggest hang-up," Kira muttered. I snorted. "Regardless of if you believe me or not, I'm giving you one last chance to end this before further bloodshed. Pal, you can't get to us, so why don't you surrender to us?" he yelled. "You have 1 minute, and then we will come in." "Fine, the bloodshed will be on your side." "Any of the men who want to surrender will be accepted as prisoners of war until after Tira is once again in Highcastle hands," Bo said calmly. 2 freedom fighters arrived armed with bows, edged up near us. Another carried a torch. "The archers have left, sir. Jay says give them about 5 minutes to be in position." "Sounds good," Bo replied without taking his eyes off the garrison. "They're not going to surrender." He pursed his lips and shook his head slightly. I honestly don't know if that's a good thing or not. No matter who they fight for, we're all Tyrans. I put my hand on his shoulder. After a minute, the soldier shouted, Coming at us yet? Thought I'd give you a couple more to think about it, Bo yelled back. Other than a few bobbing heads, no one seemed to pay us much attention from the barracks until the first volley from our forces cut through the archers on the castle wall. There was instantly a mad scramble up there as they tried to figure out where the attack had come from. The men on the ground also popped up to try and see as well. Jay's group spared half a volley down at them, and they dropped instantly, although we couldn't tell how many were injured. The enemy archers regrouped and returned fire. I winced at a couple of screams from our side. Excuse us, sir, said the archers on the ground, both having lit the arrows. We slid back to allow them a better aim, and they let fly. One fell short, but the other hit the wooden building. Almost immediately, they let loose another volley. We could hear indistinct yelling at the barracks. Jay's group was firing as soon as they reloaded to keep a steady stream of arrows heading to the adjoining wall. It seemed to be doing its job of keeping the three's archers down. Bo shifted impatiently as our two archers launched fire arrow after fire arrow. I peeked past them and watched with satisfaction as the first tendrils of flame sprouted from the roof in multiple places. It wasn't long before soldiers began streaming out the door, caught between flames and arrows. Reardon had brought the rest of the combined forces forward once the assault started. Bo held up a hand to pause them, but we all drew our weapons. I took a deep breath. Then he brought the hand down. In the garrison's confusion, our charge went unnoticed until we were almost upon them. We swarmed the barricade, in some places just pushing through it, and drove into them. I cut my first opponent down before he had time to adequately defend himself. My second parried my blow and attacked back furiously. I blocked and focused on holding my ground as the fighting raged around us. What followed was a good stretch of fierce fighting. By then, sweat was dripping perilously down my forehead, and I was panting. My opponent had gotten in 2 minor cuts, but I'd managed to dodge backwards in time to prevent any more damage. Slowly, though, he was pushing me back towards the barricade. I knew I had to act before then. I lashed out with my foot, snapping his knee straight. He yowled, stumbling back. I pressed the advantage, slicing at any part of him that was exposed. He fumbled, hopping awkwardly. I ducked a swing from his sword, pushing it further out of the way with my blade. Then I brought mine sweeping down, cutting deep into his stomach. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He went down. I engaged 2 others, but neither lasted long. Then the way in front of me was clear. I kept my guard up, scanning the area, but this part of the battle was over. Most of the remaining soldiers had surrendered, and the barracks were burning merrily. Reardon was already gathering together prisoners, and some of our people to get to work putting the flames out. It took another minute of searching to spot the others. Besides Bo, they were all together. Jay was getting patched up, and blood dripped from a wound on Kira's forehead as she waited her turn. Bry's bandage had bled through, and he'd pressed fresh bandages to it. Russ was untouched, standing nearby, ever watchful. I made my way over to them. Bo? Talking to the head of the garrison. He said he'd be back in a minute, and then we should head out once we've got everyone back in one piece, Russ said. Everyone all right? Nothing serious, Kira said. The others all agreed in varying ways. Same, I said at Jay's inquisitive look. Kira moved to help Bry get the fresh bandage on his arm, and he in turn patched her up his head as the rest of us got ourselves taken care of as well. By then, Bo was making his way back over and looked us all over critically. Everyone okay to go on? Jay and Bry cocked identical eyebrows at him. Ditto, I said, jerking a thumb towards them. All right, Ruden's going to stay here and organize things. It's time for us to hit the castle. Let's go, I said. Bo raised a hand and gathered the troops that would be accompanying us, and we headed out, leaving Reardon a section of his group behind to keep an eye on the garrison and prisoners. I hoped Vladimir could see the smoke and know his time was coming too. We set off for the main road again. I spotted Colin before he spotted me, and I sprinted forward, breaking from the others to hug him. His right arm was in a temporary sling. I noticed in an instant before I connected to hug him, but he looked healthy enough otherwise. Hey, little sis, he said, hugging me a little awkwardly with his other arm, which held his sword. What did you do to yourself? I demanded, shoving him back. Nothing permanent, he promised. We should be just on time, he added over my shoulder, as Bo and the others caught up. Perfect. You good to go on? My brother shot him a foul look. Would you and Mick lay off? Not in our nature, Bo replied lightly. Then he moved off to join Mick. Jez! Before I could even ask about Jesse and Rye, the duo came racing up. Rye appeared to not have a scratch, while Jesse had a couple of bandages, like the rest of us. I see where we rate, Jay said dryly. Really low, Rye agreed. I was your friend first, kids. That wasn't strictly true in the case of Rye, but I let him have it. Rye grinned at him, but not nearly as special. Ouch, that cuts deep, Rye. Deep. Stella had appeared much more quietly than the others, and she had her arms tightly wrapped around Jay, who was now speaking quietly to her. She nodded and then spotted me looking and managed a faint smile and a thumbs up. She was interrupted from replying by Bo's calling for everyone's attention. He gave a quick recap of what was to come, separated a few groups off to support those we'd left at the gates of the city. Then, we turned and headed for the castle. We stayed towards the front, and Bo and Mick worked their way through to join us after a minute. I have no idea how Sorin did it, and it was more than what we had planned, but the gates to the castle stood wide open. He was only supposed to have managed a side gate and not to clear the courtyard, although the area through the gates looked empty and almost forlorn. Still, Bo split people up. Some were sent to gain the walls and cover us, and others were to be a second and third waves. We were in the first wave, but waited until word reached us that we had cover before we split further and inched in along the walls. The large courtyard looked freshly abandoned. Items lay around, not particularly out of order, but as if just left when their owners wandered off. It provided us with additional cover. It only took a minute, though, before the first arrows came at us from the far end of the courtyard. They, too, were using the cover, but there didn't seem to be many of them. We worked our way from item to item, firing back our own covering fire as we moved. The second group made their way into the courtyard. "Side door," Russ said suddenly, and gestured. Although more of our group had come in with the first wave, we instinctively stayed clustered together. There was, in fact, a small door to our left. "They wouldn't have not covered it," Bo said. "Maybe not, but it's there." Bo hesitated. "I'll take charge of things out here. I'm less effective than I should be with only one arm." "Don't let Opalyn escape," Colin said, flagging down another group. "Go." I didn't like to leave him, but in many ways his job was probably safer, and I had to trust he'd be careful. Jesse and Rye moved before anyone else could. Jesse raised her sword as Rye shoved the door open hard, giving Jesse a free shot. There were 2 young soldiers on the other side who looked shocked to find someone barreling down on them. With only a second's hesitation, they threw their swords on the ground and held up their hands. Jesse smirked and beckoned them forward, handing them over to my brother and the others who had come to join him. Then we were actually in the castle and moving down the hall. The place was simpler than I'd expected, but then we were in some of the normal hallways, not the places that the royal family was usually likely to go. At the first major intersection, Bo stopped us. "We have 2 options as I see it," he said, glancing at Mick for confirmation. "One, we push our way through and do only what we need to get to the upper levels where we might find those of higher rank, including my brother. Or we clear it out room by room and do it slowly and figure the other groups will slowly catch up to us." We all exchanged glances and looked back at Bo. As far as I saw it, our choice was simple because of who we had. I felt sure the others were in agreement. "Your choice, Bo," Mick said, "but I think you know where we're all leaning. We push forward as quickly as we can, but nothing foolhardy." "We're never foolhardy. How could you say such a thing?" Bry asked, but Bo pinned him with a look. "I'm not kidding. Neither are we," I assured him. "You know this is just how we handle things." He took a deep breath. "Yeah, I know. We only had a cursory knowledge of the castle and its layout. Mick had been a toddler. It was hard to picture Mick that little, and Bo confirmed he hadn't acted a whole lot different. The last time he'd been there, and the rest of our group had never been. My oldest brother Kent had visited, but the rest of us hadn't. Reardon was one of a handful of freedom fighters who had, but he was busy at the garrison. Hindsight. Still, we hopefully knew enough. There were 7 floors, and except for the grand staircase that went straight from the ground floor and switched back its way through the galleries to the 5th floor where the grand ballroom was, the staircases were through the regular levels were staggered and made it hard for an invading force like ours to make their way through the castle. Still, it wasn't impossible, especially when the castle was mostly deserted. Sorin had done an amazing job of getting all the everyday people and servants out of the castle, or at least in concentrated areas where the majority of our people could fight them. We made it to the 3rd floor without much resistance. Though we hit occasional small pockets of soldiers, they were ill-prepared to face us. Most gave in with only a brief attempt at fighting back. Not one of those groups didn't fold after the first injury to one of their own. After some of the fighting in the streets, it was a strange sort of letdown. We took their weapons and left them, not really having any other recourse. Of course, almost as soon as the thought crossed my mind, we hit soldiers who did not cave so easily. In fact, it was the exact opposite. Word had somehow gotten ahead of us, and the ambush caught us completely without warning. Thankfully, we were on our guard, or it might have been much worse. Not surprisingly, the soldiers had the advantage of knowing the castle much better than we did. Although we had to blunder a bit to find each successive stairwell, they knew every nook and cranny. As we hit an intersection, they appeared almost out of nowhere from all 3 directions. Our only saving grace was the fact that only so many could come at us at a time. I tried to keep my focus on my fight, which I found harder when everyone around me was someone I cared about deeply. Of course, I found it easier to focus when my opponent almost split me in half because I was momently distracted by a yell to my left. I managed to deflect most of the blow at the last second, but it still left a shallow cut across my chest, neatly slicing through my shirt. I shoved his blade away and pressed the attack, blocking and slicing until I finally slipped within his guard and drove my blade deep into his side. He gasped and fell back as I drew my sword out and brought it back around to finish him off. For a second, I had no opponents, and I scanned the surging crowd of fighters. My brain registered everyone as still whole quicker than I could really fully catalog, and I had to trust that instinct as another soldier appeared to take a swing at me. I parried and pressed the attack, finding myself back to back with someone as we fought. A lightning-quick glance confirmed it was Jay fighting 2 soldiers. I pushed my opponent back and then spun, feeling my sword go deep into one of his before I turned back to deflect the next nasty strike. Distantly, I heard the continued clang of metal on metal and the shouts of battle, but could do nothing more than note them until I managed to cut down the soldier in front of me. Once done, I searched for which of my friends I could help. It happened almost the instant my eyes found Bo, who fought near Mick. I don't know if the soldiers should have identified him as the High Castle or just our leader, but Bo and Mick battled 4 soldiers between them. Then, one of the soldiers broke from Mick, spinning at Bo's unprotected back. I screamed. Time seemed to ground to a halt as the blade arced in. Then, Mick was there. Once Sorin arranged to have the main gate opened, the courtyard emptied, and all non-essentials and civilians evacuated to the main ballroom, all of which was far too easy. Where was Vladimir to countermand him? His next step was the armory. It only took a minute to find what he was looking for. King Patrick Highcastle's sword. It had been passed down through generations and hung on a wall behind the desk, the scabbard on a peg beside it. Sorin stared at it. Russ and Colin had smuggled Ani out of Oakbridge and supposedly given her detailed instructions to Dean's location. Colin, via Russ, had assured him that no one in the freedom fighters beside himself and Russ knew where Ani and Dean were. Sorin hoped at least one of them survived, so Ren had the option to follow through on his word of bringing her back once it was safe. Sorin supposed that Dean would end up living here too, as he knew his sister well enough to know that she wouldn't leave the boy behind. If the freedom fighters didn't kill him, which was well deserved, maybe Dean could... He shook his head to shake the thought loose. He had 2 more jobs to do, possibly only 1. Depending on how quick Boy Highcastle was, he supposed. With a silent apology to the previous owner, Sorin plucked the sword off the wall, followed by the scabbard. Then he turned away, and taking the nearest staircase 2 steps at a time, he made his way up to Ren's room. He hadn't ordered the guard away, but the stretch of hallway was empty. He had a momentary panic as he hurried forward and threw the door open. The fact that it had still been locked was a little reassuring. Ren spun from the window. They locked gazes. They're going to win? Sorin offered out the sheathed sword on his palms. Let's finish this. He figured that was answer enough. Ren's eyes went wide, and he stepped forward to place a hand on the blade reverently. It's yours. Vlad? I don't know, but I plan to find him, Sorin said grimly, his own hand dropping to the hilt of his sword, as Ren finally lifted his father's blade and began to buckle it around his waist. I assume you remember how to use that thing? Ren favored him with the ghost of a smile. Give me a little credit. I was not only heir, but my father knew danger was coming. He drew the sword, testing its balance. I'd always looked forward to the day this would become mine. I'm sure I wasn't your first chance for Grantor. No, but you made the effort to get it, and not just any blade. Again, their eyes met with all their complicated history. And Sorin knew that Ren understood. Sorin had to do this for himself, for Ani, for his son, for Vlad, and he had to do it alone. If I fail, I expect you to finish the job, he said. Ren nodded. They should be within the castle now. Find your brother. I saw them in the courtyard a few minutes ago. Still, for another instant, the two just stood there. Then, Sorin offered a slight bow from the waist. My liege? Ren stepped forward and gripped his upper arm. No matter what happens today, as long as I'm alive, you've got a brother. Sorin didn't deserve it. He knew he didn't, but he wanted to. Gods, but the world was a fucked up place. So he just nodded and slipped out the door, heading for the stairs up, while Ren went the other way, heading down. At the corner, Sorin glanced back. Ren would be okay. Now, for the last job. Although he had told Ren he didn't know where Vladimir was, he had a strong suspicion. His brother would be aware enough to realize this was the end. He would want to make a statement. He would also expect it to be Ren coming after him. It wouldn't be the grand ballroom, but there was location on the top floor that would be just as iconic for his brother. The large audience chamber that had been rarely used during the High Castle times, but had become Vladimir's favorite place due to making everyone come to him at the top. Sorin felt no surprise at finding the audience chamber doors flung wide open with 2 guards standing on either side. He ignored them, stepping into the open doorway. Vladimir sat at the far end in one of the thrones. There was a pause as they stared at each other, Vladimir rising. Sorin? He asked. Without looking at the guards, Sorin spoke in a low voice. You 2 are dismissed. Make your decision wisely. Then he slowly made his way down the gap between the riser seats. He watched the understanding dawn on his brother's face. Even you? He spat as Sorin reached the end of the seats and stopped. There's still time, Vlad. Vlad didn't seem to hear him. Did you do this? Let them into our castle? It's not ours. It never really was. We just stole it for a few years. We are not caretakers. No, because we didn't take care of it, Sorin said with a feeling of faint amusement. We were nothing more than invaders, and it's over now. They're within the castle grounds, and it won't take them long to make it here. It's over, Vlad. But this doesn't have to happen. He spread his arms. You're my brother. I don't want to fight you. You're the one who turned traitor, Vlad snarled. Sorin let out a laugh. You don't see the irony of this at all, do you? I'm making what we did right again. We're the traitors. Why? Because Rainier supposedly loves our sister? Because it's the gods be damned right thing to do. How can you not see that? Sorin asked, a bit desperately. He would make this right, but he didn't have to like it. It was his last job, and then the freedom fighters, the right side, could hang him or lock him in a deep hole, and things would be okay again for Tira. And, as an added bonus, Dean got the best of their family to take care of him. As Vladimir pulled his sword, Sorin was at peace. He'd always been the better swordsman. Still, he tried one more time, because he had known Vlad for his entire life, for better or for worse. Even if Vlad had ended up on Edward's side, so perfectly Edward's blood. Vlad, please! What did they offer you? Whatever they said, they will hang you and laugh as they do, Vlad said. You will die by their hand without being able to defend yourself. I will not go the same way. So be it. We deserve no less for what we've done, Sorin said and drew his sword. Vlad stepped off the dais and began to circle. Sorin instinctively matched him step for step. Do you really think you can kill me? Sorin took a deep breath and let it out slowly. I know I have to. Vlad drove forward.